Well, Happy New Year, everybody. I swear we've had about a month of this weather. Anyway, I've got a lot of stuff to get caught up on, so I'm going to show you about that. Alright, before I went on break, I was trying to get this one done. And guys, don't get pissed at me, but this is the last new Drosmax smoothbore. The guy bought it a while ago. It actually took me forever to sell it. Anyway, what he had me do is wire it for the external battery pack, and I do mine differently than Drosmax used to do them. You can just see how it goes through there and out here, and I put that other Dean's connector on there to connect here to the board. Anyway, I was really humping it trying to get this thing done, and I got the entire thing built, and I went to fire it, and the first time I fired it, the solenoid stuck in the open position and the board started smoking. So took it all apart and burned up one of these little doohickeys, and it took us a little while to figure out what happened. We traced it all the way back to the solenoid. Sergey seems to think that it wasn't wound properly, but anyway, it caused me a big headache and a delay for the customer. Anyway, I took it apart. You probably can't see that, but there's the insulation in there melted. And what else was... Oh yeah, we're going to do something pretty cool with this one. This isn't the first time this has been done. I suggested it to somebody else a couple of years ago. But since we're running an external battery pack, this actually opens up the battery compartment for BB storage. Excuse me. So the idea is I'm going to hog this out with something. I'll leave a little bit right here on the end and drill a hole in there. Put a spring in there to keep the door closed. And then we'll drill a hole in here that just drops down into the magazine. Anyway, it's going to be a while before I finish that because I've got another solenoid on the way. And this is a shutoff valve that Campbell found. So we're going to be testing this thing out. It might have some flow restrictions on it. But anyway, the main idea about this is to put it between your bottle and your magazine. And the purpose of that is so you can have your bottle connected and ready to go whenever. It's really not a good idea to leave your bottle connected to the magazine for a couple of reasons. You can have leaks, and then you can go and grab your bird and have no air in it when you need it. And the other reason is that when you leave the magazine pressurized, it's really hard on the front valve seal. I worked on one. The guy always left it pressurized, and he hadn't used it in a long time. So when I got it, I took it apart, took the valve body apart, and got in there and replaced the front valve seal in it. And I couldn't find the old one. And it turns out the old one was just smushed up against the valve body, and it was no good. So I had to dig in there with a needle or something to get it out, and after that it was fine. So I'm not going to be trying this out today. That's for the future. This Igor told me about it, and it's a double hook valve body and nut, barrel nut. And the idea is to keep it from twisting so you don't have to use tape like I do to align everything, because there's only one hook on the factory nut and only one slot. Now, I was told that this was completely manufactured by someone, but it's obviously, to me, a factory valve body with a notch cut in it. Now, he had some problems with his. It was leaking air through here. Apparently, they cut it too deep. But I'm not putting too much stock in this anyway, and I'll tell you why. Because if you put this on here like this, well, that's upside down. Put it on here like this. Look at this gap. That's not going to work with the Magnus Ops seals because that's too much of a gap. So this will be for a rainy day. I probably won't get around to this until summer when everything is absolutely dead, but not really putting a whole lot of faith into it already, just looking at it. And I've got these valves. They're 4-hole, they're steel, and they appear to be chrome plated. And I've got high hopes for these because the problem with the titanium valves is that they didn't have enough meat in that webbing between the holes. And the other day I went to go shoot and it just clicked. And I took it apart, and what had happened was when the solenoid fired, it just drove the pin all the way into the valve itself. So, other than that, I like the titanium valves. You have to make sure they're properly aligned, and sometimes they break on you when you're running 25.2 volts. And I've got a lot of hope for these. The other thing about the titanium valves is they're too long. You have to shape them. And they come with a flat valve stem end. And it needs to be tapered just like this. So if you've got one and you need to shape it, you need to put a little rim on there. And what that does is eventually what's going to happen is you can't really avoid it, is that this valve is going to slam into the top of a BB, and that's going to bend it. Now, if you've got a completely flat surface here, what will happen is it'll bend it out. It'll kind of mushroom the edge of it, and then that's going to get stuck. And it usually gets stuck in the open position, and then you're just wasting all your air. You have to take it apart and work it down a little bit more. And yeah, to get that edge on there, or to work them down, I just chuck these in a drill, a cordless drill and a vise, and just file them. So if you need to do that with the titanium valve, it works. And like I say, if you're not running 25.2 volts, like a 6S pack or anything, you're probably fine with the titanium valves. But we're going to be testing this out today. And I don't really know exactly where these came from, but I will find out, because I've got high hopes for these. So for those of you who don't know, your valve is in here. And to get to it, you have to unscrew this valve seat. And what I did was I just cut a notch in a wide flathead screwdriver, and that goes around the pin, and it works perfectly. Here is the titanium valve that was in there, and you guys might think that titanium is super strong. Well, it is, but it's also soft. And they tend to gall inside there, as you can see on this one. And there's that inevitability of it striking BBs. And because I domed it, it mostly bent inward. So behind the valve seat, you have your valve, and the spring goes around the stem, and then you have, actually, these are not in the right order, a washer and a seal. The lighting in here isn't very good, but sometimes that seal can get stuck on the inside there, and you might need to pop it out with something by going in the front of it. And also sometimes they can fall down in the air tube, but that's just something to watch out for. Anytime you have it apart, it's always a good idea to put some silicone grease on this seal and these threads, and spray some silicone lube in there, pale gun oil, whatever. Just silicone based. Don't use petroleum based, or you might wind up dieseling something. So now we've got that little assembly together. We've got our seal in there with our washer behind it. And these can be a little tricky to get in. What I do is when I've got it in there and I'm trying to get it through that front hole, is I'll go ahead and just turn it around and look in there and line it up that way. Another thing that I'm noticing about these valves is the pin is kind of rounded, and that should be really good, because if you've just got a flat surface there and you have any alignment issues at all, it's going to strike on the edge and torque your valve, and you don't want that happening. So we're all ready for the test, and I thought that you might also enjoy this. You got to do something to it though. What this is a riser that comes up and goes back over the rear sight aperture. On the other side there's a quick disconnect. These fake ACOG scopes have a very short eye relief. It's like 1.5 inches, so that brings it back. However, because this rail is plastic and there's nothing supporting it back here, it wobbles. So that's not going to be really good for when you're shooting full auto and trying to maintain a sight picture. So I need to somehow fasten this to the frame, or get a factory drozed rail, and it's metal and it goes into this rail system right here, and I think it's got, I can't remember, I think it's like 3 set screws maybe on each side, but it attaches really sturdy, and I don't know if you can flip it around backwards. I've got one on another gun, I'll have to see about that. Also, this gun has the very old magazine that I've got that part in to help prevent it jamming. I've only tried it out once. I did get a few jams with it. I was able to just slap the side of the magazine and that unjammed it, and I just kept going. So I might get a couple of jams during this test, but I'm also testing out that part in there. And for those of y'all who haven't seen this setup, I'm tethered to a 6,000 psi nitrogen bottle, and right now I've got it regulated right at about just under 1600 psi, and this is a grease hose, a high pressure grease hose that I've got running to my bird. So we are going to shoot, it's on 3K, so we'll do that. And another quick tip about these slide check valves is when you engage them or disengage them, twist them, because there's paintball bottle seals here and here, and there's a little hole that this one slides over. If you just move this thing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it's going to wear a spot in that seal, and you'll have to take it apart and rebuild it. Also, it blows all of your grease away from that one spot. So just twisting it every time you engage it and disengage it, always twist it in the same direction, because if you twist it this way and then twist it that way, you're going to be running over the same part of that seal. And we're out. So I had one little hiccup and I just shook it and it started firing again. So let's see what we have here. Pin looks fine. Let's see if it mushroomed it. Not at all. Stem looks fine. I did get that bend in there, but like I say, that's inevitable. But it bent properly. The way it was designed. And yes, I really like this valve. Well, I got a customer, so I got to run. Later, guys. One final tip when you reinstall your valve, you can position the dent facing the BBs on the bottom by gripping it with a pair of needle nose pliers, gripping the pin, that is, when it's in there, and turning it. Fishing needle nose pliers often have a little groove that runs down the length of them, and they're great to use for getting a hold of it. Alright guys, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Later.